morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get this meeting called to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by prayer. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you for the opportunity to all get together and plan for the benefit of our community. We ask for your blessing as we do that planning and your guidance, and that we'd have the courage and the will to listen to the things that you're trying to direct us towards. In your name, amen.
Okay, council, the minutes from the previous meeting have been sent. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Fred made a motion. Do I have a second? Corey seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. First on our agenda today is Brad Weber with the Public Defender. He is asking for additional $10,000 for appointed pauper counsel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Morning, Brad. Morning,
Sir.
Morning, Brad. Morning, Corey. Just take a look at everybody.
Brad, thank you.
Okay, so I've given you some brief notes here about what I'm asking for and why. Essentially, the second sentence of the first paragraph there is what $1,411.37 is what we can use out of our office to pay conflict counsel for the remainder of the year. Right now, I think I have a couple of the outstanding bills from conflict attorneys. We've got almost $800 in these, and I don't believe that's everything I've got, that we have to pay. And so the unfortunate thing is the two courts, when they assign indigent counsel, they are allowed to order those folks to reimburse the county $90 per hour for the services provided. Now, if we're in circuit court, Judge Kuplahan can normally he orders a flat fee of $100 in every case. Reason being, the majority of folks, unless their case is dismissed or they're acquitted at trial in circuit, are either serving a lengthy prison sentence, a lengthy jail sentence, or a lengthy home detention sentence. The odds of them reimbursing the county several $100s is almost zero, so they just he doesn't even add that into it. In Superior Court, Judge Conrad has been assigning folks who he finds to be partially indigent either a $50 or $100 fee at the outset of the case. Those folks usually do pay that. So far, he has not been asking us to submit hourly tallies of our time to assess that at the end of the case. So, long story short, those monies aren't coming in at a rate that's going to allow us to pay conflict counsel. So that brings us to the second issue, and I've addressed this multiple times. When I'm asking the council to provide funding to pay conflict attorneys, I have no way to anticipate how we're going to need those things. And so there's multiple examples that I can give you of what happens. I'm involved in a case right now where there were 4 people in a car, got stopped. All 4 got arrested. All 4 got charged with possession of narcotics because the backpack that had the heroin in it was in a place where all 4 people could have had access to it. They all 4 denied that it's theirs, so the police aren't going to mess with that when they're on the street. They're just going to arrest everybody. They're going to send the information to the prosecutor. The prosecutor's going to charge them. We have 3 public defenders. There's 4 clients. Well, in this case, I currently am representing a husband and wife who were in the car together. And so there's not a conflict yet, and I didn't assign one of those 2 people to an outside attorney to try to be judicious with the use of our budget. However, each of those cases is set for trial. So at some point, love doesn't always last forever, unfortunately. When we get to trial, one of them is going to be called as a witness, and I can guarantee you they're going to say, he did it. Now, I'm in a world of hurt when her case comes to trial. And if they both get convicted, when they appeal those cases and when they file post-conviction relief, there's going to be a lot of question as why did you represent these two people knowing there was this potential conflict. Then yesterday I had a new situation when we have cases where there's confidential informants who are purchasing undercover drug buys, participating with the local DTEC task force. Those confidential informants are normally folks who have some type of a criminal history or a pending matter hanging over their head. Because, it makes sense, the average citizen who hasn't been in any trouble isn't going to volunteer to do something that's potentially dangerous just to help out. Well, I don't know who these confidential informants are until I talk to my client and we start going through the case. Hey, who do you think this person was? Well, they always know. Well, yesterday I met with a new client who's charged with 3 counts of dealing methamphetamine, one of which is a level 2 felony, and she informs me the name of the confidential informant, who is a person who I represented, whose case just got settled back in March, and based on the nature of the plea deal that she was offered in her case, which was a drug dealing case, I can assume at the time she's probably working as an informant because she's getting this very favorable offer. So, does that create a conflict with my new client and I? That's a heck of a question. But certainly, if we go to trial and we lose, and I'll try to, I'll cross-examine this confidential informant, and I've got all this information I know about her that I've gained through the attorney-client relationship that I could potentially be in trouble for when I cross-examine her if I make that information public. But if I don't cross-examine her firm enough, when this new client, if she gets convicted, she certainly is going to, at some point, the appeals attorney or the post-conviction relief attorney is going to dig through things and say, hey, why were you representing each of these people? And so now a level 2 case, and this woman unfortunately has a level 3 or a 4 pending in Wells County. She's got a lot at stake. If I assign this case to conflict counsel, if the other attorneys in our office don't have conflicts, I can give it to one of them. If they do, now that case, that level 2 isn't going to get resolved at the next pretrial conference. It's going to rack up a heavy bill. So, and I've said this multiple times, if I could make the decision on what crimes to investigate, who to arrest, what to charge them with, we'd be in much better shape. We'd only need one public defender, and all the cases would get solved at the initial hearing. But that's not the case. So just for general information, though, what I put in here additionally is just to remind everybody here what we've received yearly, the next little paragraph, in reimbursement from the Indiana Public Defender Commission. So when we are from the Public Defender's Office asking for money, we do receive about 40% of that of our total budget. The county receives that back each year. The next area shows what we've paid out for conflict cases, and it shows the unpredictability of that. So in 2017, we paid out about $2,000. That's great. And then the next year it went up again. The next 2 years, and this year so far, we're halfway through the year, and we're on pace to have the most paid out ever. And again, it's a result of cases where there's multiple folks arrested who are co-defendants with confidential informant cases, multiple people arrested in a car where there's allegations of drug possession, and then children in need of services when you have 3 or 4 children and there are multiple fathers, step-parents involved. All those folks have a right to have an attorney. At some point, we run out of people, and we have to assign those to various attorneys. The Chins cases can be troubling because they last a long time. They last about The shortest ones last about a year. And then if we end up assigning a case that's a Chin's case that's to a conflict attorney, and it ends up going to a termination of parental rights, then that becomes a very expensive endeavor. So the unpredictability causes us troubles in that regard. So
Brad?
that, yes,
Can I ask a question?
yes you can.
Okay, so who makes sure that the defendant pays the public defender fee?
Who makes sure? The courts. They will make those fees and costs are made, when Judge Conrad orders it at the initial hearing, he sets a deadline that they have to pay that fee by. So he'll say you have to pay $100 within 30 days of the outset of the case. When they assess the fees at the end of the case, it becomes a condition of probation. If they're not on probation, if they've simply served an executed sentence, it becomes a judgment. And at that point, the odds of collecting it are almost zero. Because of course, they can be summoned into court and said, why aren't you paying this? And they're going to say, I don't have any money. And then you can't incarcerate them for simply not being able to pay. If it's a condition of probation, it can be considered a violation of probation if they fail to pay if the court believes that they have the ability to do it. So one way to increase this would be if the courts would, on every case, require us to give an estimate of how many hours we spent, and then they would charge folks $90 an hour. You could potentially, they could potentially collect more money. So if sometimes there's a situation where at the outset of the case, the person's unemployed, and as the case progresses, that they maybe get a job and their financial circumstances are better. In those cases, I believe they probably should be assessed a portion of the cost of representation.
Does that happen often?
It's not frequent. And then we have the cases where we have folks who are what I consider, they're indigent, but they're working. So they have a full-time job, and when they say in court, how much do you earn? And they say $18 an hour. That sounds like a lot until you realize, well, they have 3 children, and here's what they pay for their mortgage or their rent, and on and on and on. At the end, the judge may say, okay, you're not indigent. Go hire an attorney. Then we come back to court 30 or 45 days later, and they say, well, I can't, because the attorney wants $2,000 up front, and I'll never have $2,000 at one time in the foreseeable future. So at some point, then the judge is left with the decision, do I either force this person to represent themselves, which that's not good, or do I assign the public defender and then again maybe hope to collect some money and say that they're partially indigent? But that doesn't happen very often. Normally, once we get assigned, they'll assess them a small fee, hopefully they pay it, and it doesn't add up very quickly.
I don't know why this wouldn't make sense. I think we probably need to move forward with this. Just a couple of, I guess, quick questions. This is coming out of which account are you wanting it out of?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Which account? This is coming out of county general, is what we're saying? Because your current cash, and it looks like you have 2,000 left in the line item, but there truly only is cash available of 1,400. Is that what's happening?
That's right, and I don't understand how that works, that part of it. I'd have to refer to the folks back here that run things from the auditor's office.
Did you increase this line item for your budget for 2022?
I did. We're requesting so we didn't, what we're hoping will happen is that particular line item is that we're requesting $15,000 for 2022. That's the short answer.
The hope is that this additional will hold up while they build up those user fee monies in that line to last for a while, that they won't have to do an additional. We had actually contacted SBOA about this, and the only way to put money into that line is those user fees charged by the judges. And if they don't pay, then you don't get that money, and it's just not keeping up. So
Even
the
if that-
hope is that what he's asking for now and in the budget next year will hold up for quite some time and allow that to be built back up with the user fees.
Even at that, those user fees, I'm sure don't cover all the costs, do they?
No, the ideal situation would be, when you look at court costs that are paid at the end of a case. It's broken down into what all those things go to. And then pretrial diversion agreements, those are frequently offered on low-level offenses. And a portion of those fees go to the prosecutor's office, and they can generate some income to their office that way. It'd be nice if some of that would go towards us, but that's not the way it's structured.
I'd make a motion to approve the $10,000.
Brad made the motion, Kathy seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. Have a good days.
Now we have a second Brad.
Good morning, good morning.
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 You are seeking an additional of $20,000 for dust control, correct?
Yes. So a brief background. Starting quite a few years ago when they set the dust control amount that we would go out and spray on the roads per foot. Last year figured out there was some figures weren't quite done correctly. So the price, like for 19 and 20 was like $3.45 a foot, $3.45 a foot. When we figured out, it actually dropped to $2.79. So for 2019, they sprayed 6,117 gallons. 2020, 5,418 gallons. Well, when people figured out the price was quite a bit cheaper than what it had been in 21, we shot 23,903 gallons. So basically, we plan off the years before to what we put in. And when people figured out that price had dropped, we had a really good response this year and did, almost 3 times as much. So therefore, we hadn't quite figured it was going to be that much additional.
So roads are sprayed for this by request?
This is dust control, and what they do is every spring, we open up a time frame. They can come into the office, and they come in and apply for this.
Okay,
They pay for it per foot, tell us how many feet they want. Then after we get them all in, we'll go out and spray the roads. So yes, they come in and request it.
gotcha.
So basically,
So are these recoverable, is this recoverable money then based on if we're charging them for that? Is that correct?
coverable. All we do is we can only charge them for the product that is put down.
Right, okay, so this is more to pay for the labor?
It pays for the oil.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
What they pay for is the oil.
Okay.
So yeah, basically, we had a really good response this year. Last year, people still didn't know, and they figured it out this year.
Okay.
So going forward for next year, now we have a better idea how to plan, for next year's budget, so.
And this will come out of the MBH account?
Yes.
So I know there's an MBH and an MBH restricted. What does the restricted cover? What can it
I'm
cover?
sorry, I should say that'll come out of the restricted portion. The restricted covers all your road maintenance and that kind of stuff. The MVH just covers our operating costs and that.
Okay, so it'll come out of the restricted fund then?
Yes.
Okay. We've got that? Okay. I would make a motion to accept.
Fred made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
John seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carla Marbaugh with the Health Department.
These are grants that she's going to present that the commissioners have already approved. It's just awaiting council approval, just FYI.
Do you have the paperwork, Tony?
I have all the stuff to sign right here.
Okay.
Both copies, one for you, one for us. Yeah.
Okay. I have 2 more grants. You approved 2 last time. This one, we're getting $50,000 again for Adams Memorial Hospital. We're a pass-through agency for them to do testing from July 1st to December 31st. So that's the first grant. They already received $100,000 in the first go-around for testing. And then the second grant is the grant that we get every year to fund my position. We're gonna get $25,000 for that, and then we usually get an additional. Once they figure out who all's taking the grant, then the pot of money that's left, they divide up and give to everybody. So it will be, last year it was 32,000, but that won't be, usually it's around 4,000, 5,000 that they give us on top of that for different projects. This year I funded the MASH casualty bags, or the Stop the Bleed bags for the schools and stuff, so I did have some left over that I could do that with this year, so.
I'll make a motion.
Corey made the motion to accept both grants. Okay,
Second.
Fred? Corey and Fred, yep. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sandy Brown with Circuit Court is doing a transfer.
I'm just coming today to request a transfer, our psychiatric and medical service fee, which is where our psychiatric evaluations come from. I need to transfer $500 from Pauper Council into that psychiatric line item. The evaluations kind of fluctuate each year, depending on the cases that we get. So it's just kind of a toss-up every year of what we need. So I'm just asking for that $500 transfer.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. And Kathy?
Who was that late, who made it one?
Corey? Kathy?
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So you'll be able just to move that money from one line item to the next.
We'll just move it.
Next, we have Golden Meadows with Danielle York.
They're all wondering where that came from. The booth. So another auditor.
Inside, yep. Golden Meadows?
We're taking that off of the agenda today, and it may come up later.
Next thing would be then the tax abatements, Mr. Baker with Decatur Diamond.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm here along with my daughter Ann Reza representing Decatur Diamond. This is Chris Schoaf, who's plant manager, Dennis Mott, who's the CFO, and I think Colton Nichols from the DEC is here also in support of the abatement request. So at this time, I'll turn this over to Chris and Dennis to give a brief overview or explanation of what is being done and what is being requested. And then if Colton wants to interject any comments, and then certainly we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
At the council meeting, I believe last month, we had indicated that we're in the process of making some decisions on some new equipment to be brought into our operations. There's three major pieces of equipment. One is called a Danobat. It's a grinding machine.
Give you a picture of it, I can give you the big technical explanation, but I don't even understand that, so. I think there's maybe where I got to.
Thank you.
This machine, I'll let Chris explain what it does.
It's actually a cylindrical OD grinder. So some of the tooling we're trying to get into is actually multi-step round diamond tools. So you have to grind the ODs of them. Most of the tolerancing on those things are down into the plus or minus 4 microns. So that's pretty tight. You don't know how close a micron is. This machine will allow us to do that. It has onboard gauging. So it actually will check the part, figure out if it's the size or not, go in and regrind it if it needs to. Save a lot of time, a lot of manpower. Not manpower, but man hours, I should say. Just from running back to an offline inspection unit, so.
When he says a micron, you can think of a strand of hair, a single strand. That's how tight the tolerance we have to have on a number of pieces of equipment. The second piece of equipment that we're talking about is a Mazak machining center. Both of these two pieces of equipment, in order to even get it into our plant, when our plant was built, we have 6-inch concrete floors, which in most cases would be sufficient. But because these pieces of equipment are so big and to maintain its balance, we have to cut out part of our concrete floor in our building and pour concrete footers and pads to set this equipment on. I'll let Chris again explain what this piece of equipment does.
Yeah, the Mazak Intergrax is actually it's a pretty neat machine. I mean, rather than have a lathe to turn your parts, a mill to do all the milling features and offline things to drill holes, this thing does it all in one operation. So you basically load a chunk of steel up, and out the other end comes your finished part. I mean, certain cycle times where currently we're having maybe a 3 or 4 day runtime on a part, we'll take it down to less than an hour. So it's going to speed up throughput big time. And the big thing about this business is a lot of the time money doesn't matter. It's whoever can get me the part the quickest. So that's what we're going after.
The last major piece of equipment, we're still investigating this and haven't made a firm commitment to. The other ones we're in the process of testing those other pieces of equipment, the first two, and if they meet the standards that are necessary, we will be probably cutting the purchase order for. This last piece of equipment, as I said, we're still making some decisions about that, but we did include it in the abatement request so that if we do make the decision, we don't have to come back and come before the council again and spend your time as well on it. I'll let Chris explain what that piece of equipment does.
The Power Diamond 400 is a pretty interesting piece of equipment. It's actually more of a carbide grinder. Most of our tool, I shouldn't say most, a lot of our tooling is basically what holds the diamond on is carbide. So we'll have a round piece of carbide with some pockets in it and everything. That's where the diamonds get brazed into. This machine will allow us to go in and grind our own carbide, pocket it, do all the things we need to do to it. Right now, we have to sublet all that out. Normally somebody out of town, out of state, and anytime you sublet out stuff, you lose control of it. We'd like to bring it all back in-house, basically do the whole process in our facility there from raw material to shippable part.
So it allows you to make your own grinders, basically.
The carbide cutter bodies
yeah.
itself, we'd be able to do that
It's
ourselves.
the tool to make the tool.
Basically, it's going to make a tool. You're exactly right.
The people running these machines, do they have to have certain certifications?
There's going to be in-depth training on all of these things for sure.
What kind of?
We've actually, the first machine Dennis showed you, the Danabac grinder. I'm actually scheduled right now to fly to Houston Sunday night for the runoff on that. If everything works out, they actually have a gentleman flying in from Spain to do the runoff for us. So once we're past that, we decide it's good, we bring in the plan to likely bring the gentleman in from Spain.
Like commission it on site type of deal?
Yeah, but basically recreate the runoff in our facility to prove everything's good. The Mazak machine, the runoff's gonna be in Hartford, Connecticut. Same thing. They have gentlemen from Florence, Kentucky, where Mazak has a factory there. They'll fly those guys into Decatur. I think that's 2 weeks of training just on that machine itself. So it's not something where you just hand you the keys and they walk away.
We did apply to the state of Indiana for some training money, and they have approved that. And it's all kind of a big package that we're trying to put together. Another part of the project is, as we talked about last month, trying to make a decision as to being in Decatur, possibly being in Dayton, Ohio, just north of Dayton, Ohio. We would be shutting down our Dayton facility. Some of those people would be transferring to Decatur, and a number of pieces of equipment would be transferred to Decatur as well. Those pieces of equipment have never been in Decatur, so part of the abatement is including that, and it's about the $2.5 million that we're requesting, about $300,000 of it is the used equipment that will be transferred over. As you probably have seen in the abatement request, we've held our headcount steady, even though we know we're going to be upgrading our staff, where we have to get more trained people to run some of this sophisticated equipment. Until we can see the impact on the marketplace so that we can, A, get things out quicker, a little bit more sophisticated and so on. We don't want to make a commitment to you that we're going to hire 8 to 10 people and then turn around and not see that right away. It may take us 6 months to a year to start seeing some of that impact in the marketplace, but we're willing to make the financial commitment to doing the investment in the equipment.
So long-term hope would be to create a few more jobs, so.
Correct.
Julie Marie?
The job market right now, they're having trouble just getting back up to the figures that they originally were projecting. And so in time, we think that that will improve and they will exceed the number that's reflected in the statement of benefits. But, you know, realistically, they're trying to be very conservative so that they don't overstate what they're capable of doing. This is job retention, but it's also eventually, I think, going to lead to job creation.
I just got a question, clarification, I guess. The third one, you said you wrapped it up just in case?
We included it in the request.
I guess my question would be, would that still be valid if it did pass and they didn't purchase this? Would it still be included? Would the abatement still stand?
Yes.
Okay, so with or without this?
The abatement is just on what is actually installed. So if it doesn't get installed for some reason, I think the thinking is it's going to be, but at this point, they haven't had the opportunity to test it and make sure that it does what it needs to do in order for it to fit. So, but if
It looks good on paper.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it will happen, but if it doesn't change the abatement. It doesn't, because they only get an abatement on the equipment that's actually installed.
Julie, today we're just approving the resolution, correct? And then it goes to a public hearing and
It has to
then,
go to a public hearing after publication, so the actual resolution won't be able to be passed until next month.
Right. Today would be the declaratory resolution. If council adopts that, then I would ask that you schedule a public hearing. I've got a legal notice prepared. I spoke with Tony earlier, and you know, if that timing is correct, then we'll get this published. Notice has to also be delivered to the taxing units that are overlapping to make them aware of the abatement request. And, you know, then once we get to the next meeting, we hold a public hearing. And after that public hearing, then a confirming resolution would be introduced, and you would hopefully adopt that. You have a right to adopt it with modifications, or reject it at that point. It's not until that confirming resolution is adopted that the abatement is actually approved. So this is the first step in the statutory process of having abatement. And I would say that because there was a prior abatement, this area has already been designated an economic revitalization area. So this resolution simply reaffirms that designation.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Fred,
Second.
John? Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. And then if I may, I've got 3 or 4 copies here. If I could get a signature, I have to get a copy of the auditor, a copy of the assessor, and then we send out copies to taxing units. So if I may pass this around, I think I should start with you. And then also, if I may, Tony had indicated that your next meeting is August 10th, and indicated that there would be some perfunctory matters that you would address initially, but would request that you schedule the public hearing for 8:35 next month. And then following that would be the introduction of the next resolution, confirming the resolution. If is 8:35 an appropriate time then to advertise this?
8:35? Yeah, I believe so, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just do it this way, because there's several, you see there, pass these on.
And there's 4 copies here we need.
I think there's 3 or 4 copies there now. Thank you for your support.
A lot of paper and hopefully I'll say the same.
Well, since Tom's here, we'll go ahead and move to Tom. Tom, we're gonna go ahead and skip to you since the other people aren't here yet. You are requesting an additional $1,000 for training?
The training fund that I collect out of my fees.
Make sure we get them all signed and by the
Yeah.
They're all
Just let me
out
go
there.
quick before you get up.
In the past, the fire reporter took out a preparation fund. The state board has always had kind of iffy, so I don't want to be.
One.
And then last month, or the month before that, you also asked for an additional for your training fund. So will this cover the rest of the training for the
This
year?
should cover the rest of the year.
Okay.
I wasn't sure what to do a month ago. A month ago, I thought I had to do everybody the same. I just found out that I have to do different amounts for the clients and all. I don't have any training out of account, this is my only training.
Do I have a motion for Tom's transfer or additional?
Make a motion to accept.
Fred? And second. And John? Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to the sheriff. The sheriff has an additional appropriation of $57,554.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is, I'm sorry, which one are we doing?
The 57,554,
7554?
yes.
Okay. This is for the upgrade of the memory server for the secure side of the jail for recording the camera systems. We need enough to get us by the tort claim process. Right now, we only have 45 days. So this will take us up to about 210 days, 200 days, and that will get us past any claims to where if we would have missed downloading an incident, if they give us a notice in that time frame, the legal time frame, we can still go back and recover that incident and make recordings. Because if we lose it and we are served with a tort claim and don't have any video evidence, it will be very bad for us. This is something that I think was on the table when they built the facility, but when they cut funds and tried saving some money, they said, well, we'll get back to it later. Well, it's 4 years later and we need to get this back up and running because we are taking a liability if we miss an incident. Because right now, we try and stay on top of it. We think we might have something, we download it and just save it. But if we miss it, it's gone forever. So this gets us up within, from what Mark Brady says, get us past the legal justification of a tort notice.
And this is a state requirement, kind of thing?
Yes, for tort claims for being sued.
Yeah.
Yes. This will get us fulfilled in that. And this is gonna come out of, I believe this is coming out of Hume Jail.
Are there user fees or licenses required for the additional?
We already maintain that because we have 45 days of storage. This just gets us that, so there's no more additional fees to it. It's just enlarging our capacity only.
I'd make a motion to accept.
Second.
A second.
Fred and Kathy or Fred and John?
Flip a coin. Go ahead, John.
Fred and John. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
We have another one?
You have now a new hire for court security.
Oh, okay. I have not found anywhere in any notes, but we approved a third position for court security. We've had two. We approved a third one sometime last year because I budgeted this year for that position. We finally hired somebody for that position, and when we went to put them on payroll, the salary ordinance didn't include that third person. So I'm asking you to include that third person on the payroll salary, so we can hire that person.
And already budgeted for
We
yourself.
were already budgeted for it. And that's why, but I went back and checked notes and minutes, and I can't find it. But, we budgeted for it, the budget was approved for it, so I didn't know what else to do other than come to you to see if we could correct the salary ordinance.
So why do we need a third person if you're just now hiring them and we're 6
Because I
months
couldn't find
into
anybody
the,
to hire.
okay.
It's
So
been
this just-
open.
Like to take over vacations?
It's to fill gaps, vacation, because right now, if someone goes on vacation, then I'm pulling road deputies off the road, to cover those positions, which shorts the road. We're paying them a lot more than we're paying a court security person. It will allow rotation, between the two buildings, and then, someone roaming, basically, through probation, just around the two building grounds. But the biggest relief is also when someone leaves, then we have coverage for it. We also have a retirement coming up in September. Mike Cloud's retiring. So I'll start the process, and then when he retires, we still have two at that point also. And then we'll be looking to replace Mike when he retires in September.
And it's already in there, right?
Yeah, it's,
Yeah,
it's,
I'll make a
we went
motion.
to hire and everything, and the Bree said, you can't. It's like, why not? The salary ordinance only shows 2 spots instead of 3.
I'll second. We went back and checked minutes and checked the recordings of those meetings. What in there?
I cannot remember when we did it, but it might be early last year because I
Do a part
budgeted
of-
for it.
Do we do a part of the budget process, or we just talked about it and then stuck it in there maybe? We probably talked about it when you were here doing your line by
In
lines,
the fall,
maybe.
we could have. I just know we've had the conversation. I've kind of talked to people, people kind of remember it. But when the budget, I looked in the budget and the spot's there. So I'm just seeing if we can amend the salary ordinance to show the 3rd spot.
Well, I made a motion to accept it. Fred seconded, but do we need a larger, more encompassing, if there's no record of it anywhere except for a line item, do we need to make some sort of formal?
No.
Okay, I just double
Because
check
the
it.
salary ordinance approves the position, basically. Without the salary ordinance showing 3, I can't hire. So it sits there. So I think correcting the salary ordinance corrects the issue.
Okay. All right, double checking.
Yep.
Okay, so John made the motion, Fred seconded, am I correct? Okay, any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that's all we have for you.
Is Mike on here for an additional?
Yeah.
Did you not file the paperwork in the time?
Nope.
The equipment part of the CARES Act, is that maybe it's going on next month? You've received nothing? All right, I'll get that fixed then. I'll probably see you next month.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sheriff.
Thanks.
And was Jeremy and them coming over for the DOC grant? Are you going to be part of that? That was already in the commissioners.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I can be.
Well, Jack has a grant, DOC has their grant, they're not here yet. So they may want to throw this Jack there.
And then Ian's grant, my grant, and Jack's grant are the 3 grants that just,
Yeah, and
Jack, come on up.
I think the paperwork was sent out to council on the DOC grant, which the commissioners approved, so these guys are coming, should have been.
It wasn't in our attachments.
What?
DOC.
The only one we got was Jack's for 30. It
No, I
wasn't,
thought we had sent that out to council though, like a long time ago. Not with the other stuff, but a long time ago.
I don't know if they gave us
I think. Commissioners.
Come on.
No, we may not have gotten any pre-trial. The commissioners approved it at their last meeting, this DOC grant.
This is for the pre-trial. I don't have anything for the DOC.
there's no like signature form for us to sign off on.
No, I got it here. Or no, I don't.
This is for the pre-trial. Morning.
Okay.
Because that's like.
We don't have anything on that. I think you just,
It's more of a, this is what we applied for, this is what we
it's
received.
grant money that they're getting from the Department of Corrections.
Correct.
They divvy it out to.
For
various
community corrections, for the probation spot and my mental health jail treatment. And then it used to also be drug court. So they refiltered the drug court out into what he's gonna talk to you about as part of the money he's using. And then DO's, community corrections absorbed the rest of it into a program that is basically using that money to help get mental health and substance abuse help faster to the individuals. Because right now, when they apply for either mental or substance abuse help, it's 45 days before they get evaluated and start getting treatment. Well, this money is going to be used to expand that program to go to more vendors that can provide treatment and assessment within 10 days. So that's what that other money that was separated from drug court back into the DOC, let them keep the money. And then Ian's using it for this project, and then Jack will tell you what his money is being used for. And then our other grants have stayed the same. My jail treatment grant, the other DOC grant that Ian used and Jack used, that really didn't change at all, and they just rubber stamped it again, and DOC's approved it, and we're just letting you guys know that that's approved, except for, like I said, the money from drug court was redistributed to community corrections and then to his program.
So of that DOC grant, how much money of county general was sent to or told to DOC that we were going to foot the bill on?
I don't think there was any.
There's no
There's no county general.
money used in
It's
it.
all grant
It's
money.
all DOC grant money.
We are
that comes in.
paying for health insurance benefits for some of their staff, and they have to report that as county general dollars. So I just wanted to know how much of that county general dollars is being allocated.
How much of the insurance benefits some of them are getting, you mean? Is that what you're saying?
What is it that, of that grant, so some of it goes for different employee salaries and different stuff, but how much are we allocating, how much are we, county general, paying for those employees that the grant doesn't cover?
I think Jimmy Wires came at 9:30, and he was gonna talk about the DOC side of things with the fiscal, so he might know more than, as for like what the sheriff was saying, there was around $60,000 a year DOC was providing for drug court, and then from July 1st to December 31st of 2021, the board split it up between probation, utilizing the new program raised probation, or utilizing it for Project Sunrise as a new corrections student hall service. So that's the stuff we do know about. As for the county general stuff, we'll have to talk to Ian or Jerry.
So we'll wait on that.
Are we adding employees?
The only one, probation is looking to hire be a part-time field officer with drug court. They did home checks, they did intensive drug testing and things like that. With Judge Conrad, we rolled that into like an intensive grace probation, is what we called it, probation supervision.
Right.
To do the home checks, we're looking to get a part-time field officer, which is about $3,500 of the dollars for the next 6 months is used for. The rest of it would be drug testing, and then like exercise workbooks for the offenders. So that's what we're using for.
Do benefits go with part-time positions?
Social Security does.
And that's allocated in that $3,500 for this month. That's what we're requesting to cover all of it through the DOC grant for the part-time position next year.
So nothing should change when it comes to benefits, right? mean, that's what you're asking, isn't it?
Yeah.
As far as I understand, we're not adding anybody that will add benefits package to, but she was asking how much is general money used to allocate towards those individuals that the county's covering, and yeah, that's been Ian
I don't
or,
think we ever have gotten that information, but when Jeremy gets here, we can ask him how many people it is and figure that out, because some may be on the family plan, some may be on the single plan.
Let's
But
talk
the
about your
grant itself
30.
is for 73,396.01 total for the DOC grant, that they're getting in grant money to divvy out to the agencies.
For community corrections?
They're getting part of it.
But
No, that's the wrong amount.
Yeah, it's
That's the wrong amount.
300, it's almost
I was
$300,000.
looking at Sheriff Dan's money from something else. E911.
But just to make sure I'm following this, so the money, this is basically the grant that was being used for drug court. Now that that's not happening, we're redirecting those funds at this point.
Trying to keep pulling that from the DOC.
Yeah, okay.
and
Without-
they accepted the programs that they put in for to keep that money here local.
Okay, so we're not hiring any new people, we're just retasking the people that were doing something else to doing something else at the grant.
There's a new part-time field officer doing basic compliance checks, but that's part of the money that came from drug court that was also used to pay for compliance officer in drug court. Now that compliance officer just falls under Jack's control, and he's doing the checks under Jack, and that 3,500 pays the hourly wage for him plus the Social Security benefits. So there's no cost to the county for that new part-time person.
No new costs.
And that's under the $32,000 grant.
Well, that's where it's a little messy. So
Okay.
for pre-trial, I think it was scheduled for 9/20, and that's where I want to at least give everybody some info on the request is going to change for pre-trial. But yeah, so the 3,500 was DOC, and this is a separate grant through Indian Office Court Services that we're looking to help with the part-time for pre-trial. So whenever
Which
we're
is
done-
Rhonda's spot.
Which is separate. I don't want to confuse anybody. So when we're done talking about DOC, I'm glad to go over the pre-trial stuff.
Rhonda was hired as a part-time individual. Is she maintaining that
Correct. Yeah, she's around 24 to 28 hours a week.
24 to 28?
Correct.
So I don't have any more questions about DOC. Need to go cover pretrial?
Whenever pre-trial started, we were kind of putting things together. There was a temporary grant available through Indian Office Court Services that was going to last either through the end of this year or there's going to be one more round. So we knew that the long-term plan through that funding was not going to last long. There's an option to get certified as a pre-trial agency through court services. Being a part-time, part-time person going to be certified, I thought it was kind of a shot in the dark to get certified. We did send something down earlier this year, and we heard back late June, mid-June, I think, and they gave us everything that we asked for within a 6-month span. So currently, Indiana Office Court Services is funding it in a July to June fiscal year, but they're switching it into a calendar year like DOC is. So they're in the middle of a transition. So even though they said they funded us through December, they're looking to get back with us in a couple of months and say, hey, we're going to make sure you have funding for the next year. We're going to show you how to apply for that. So I'm not too nervous about it only being through December of this year. It sounds pretty promising that we're going to be able to still do the same type of funding next year in October. Unfortunately, the certification, they don't say there's like an end point to it. It sounds like they understand that it's a new burden for all the counties, and they're looking to say, hey, if you guys do what you're supposed to do, we're willing to fund you indefinitely. So it's a really good opportunity, I think. We're allowed to still keep it small, that part-time position. We haven't heard any concerns with the sheriff in the jail, so hopefully things keep going well there. So since it's still through the same entity, but it's a different grant, I was coming in front of everybody today to get permission for the transfer. We still have funding from that old grant through about October, November, so I'm not in a rush to get things switched over. I'll be back over in August for 144 and additional for this new grant. So, for the $32,080, that is the part-time wages and the Social Security for Rhonda. We got some money for drug testing, and it's
training, to offset the training program, so.
We're kind of, if I remember right from being at the board meeting for that, but we're kind of expanding a little bit the pretrial stuff, right? Which in the long run ends up saving us money, doesn't it? Making our system flow a little more efficiently. Am I correct? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, it's not a huge expansion, but it's a little bit more involvement to meet the state criteria. Circuit court's been referring, some through pretrial as well, trying to find ways to help cut down the jail population.
But it's still not, I mean, it's grant dollars that are funding it, so even if it expands a little bit, it's not out of county general, but
We will absorb it still.
yeah.
So Rhonda's salary is paid from her grant too, right? Not county general?
Fully eligible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this grant's just picking up her social security? So it's different grants?
Yeah, so the short-term one is running out in October, November, and this one's gonna be able to go on indefinitely. So that's why we're trying to switch over to this one, so there's not an end date. And fortunately, they're able to right now cover her salary, social security, and like I said, we're trying to offset some drug testing and training hours that she's. That's all through the grant, nothing out of county general. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions concerning this grant?
You said they were going to go on a calendar year next time,
Correct,
and that would be January through December.
yeah.
What's your anticipated amount for 22?
Pretty much the double amount.
Double the amount?
Yeah, so this is pretty much what I think I need for 6 months. So I'm looking to ask that for the full year next year, so around $64,160 approximately. So that's what we're gonna request for 2022.
I make a motion to approve.
Fred? Fred and John? Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
All right.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
And do we need to go back to the DOC?
And on the amount of that, I was looking at different minutes, the actual amount on the DOC grant, total was $537,660. And it's divvied out to various departments, Judge Conrad, Jack, Community Corrections, Sheriff, so forth. So I'll let Jeremy speak to that. I spoke out of turn earlier on the amount.
Jeremy?
No, thank you so much. I apologize to the council. I'm filling in for Mr. Gilbert, who is on vacation this week, and so he's in sunny Florida as we're dealing with this. So, but he has brought to the attention here of council, looking to appropriate $42,000 that was originally going to go for the second half of drug court, but now that drug court has dissolved, this will actually go to a Project Sunrise. And what Project Sunrise is it's going to help our offenders that come on over 30 days to get mental health evaluations and to get substance abuse evaluations that sometimes without insurance is not happening, or by the time they try to get somebody set up, it's sometimes a long road to get those services, you know, as far as the financial need. But this grant that we're going to use from DOC that was going to drug court, that now is going to us, that we have state approval on, of the $42,000, is just going to help with that to get those services. And the nice part about this is if somebody's on for 30 days and then they either go to probation or they move on to no supervision, they can continue using that grant funding up to 60 days until they can hopefully get on HIP 2.0 or some sort of insurance, or possibly obtain a job that they can get health insurance quickly to use that. So what we're asking for council is just to be able to add a line item to our grant for that grant funds that we're going to move from drug court to community corrections. And like I said, instead of using drug court, it's going to go to this Project Sunrise. Any questions for me? One thing, kind of like Jack was just talking about, we have submitted to the Department of Corrections for the full amount of $84,000 to continue that project. And what is nice about that is I had a conversation with Leah Williams, and from DOC, and she was very excited about this program, and we get to meet with her next week just to kind of discuss it a little bit more. So we're kind of hoping that maybe Little Adams County may have started an idea throughout the state, so.
It's just kind of closing the gap of, essential services to people who need it for those evaluations, right? And
Yes, certainly.
zeroing out this line item and moving to another one.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many participants do you expect?
That's the trick, we're not sure. We already have, I believe, 3 that have filled out paperwork, and I may refer to Stephanie behind me. Was there 3 so far? Okay, yeah, so 3 so far and 1 had his first appointment, I believe, yesterday. So,
I know counseling can be very expensive. Is $42,000 enough for these 3 people?
this will actually be contractual per month, so I believe it's gonna be set up the way, whether we send 1 or 100, and this will be through both the Bowen Center and Adams Behavioral Health. So that monthly amount is gonna split to 2 different agencies to help out.
And motion to accept.
Brad?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? So does this Recovery Works, is there like a gap between Recovery Works and this? Or how is Recovery Works, how are we able to use that money for these individuals?
I will defer. I'm not sure. Who recovers it?
So basically, this grant is going to cover anything that may not be covered. But in the meantime, the goal would be that one of the agencies that is set up, they would be working so that they're getting insurance in a quick amount of time. But if there is somebody who works too many hours, makes too much money, but still needs services, this is going to cover that gap. The goal is to get them insurance and to get them to use any kind of services that are available. But if it's not, there is still that portion of people who need services that cannot financially do it. And we're hoping that this will help them to cover those costs and still get help.
In the time frame, short, immediate.
Yes. The assessment would be for both agencies within 10 business days. And then we could start services as soon as we could get them in, like after that.
Any further discussion?
Do you have a process in place to track the benefit of the program?
Yes, we have to, definitely with the Department of Corrections, they want to have all that information as well, so that'll be included on some monthly reports as well.
We
I know
submit
that.
monthly and quarterly reports on all of our grants, and it asks those questions that are standard for everybody receiving a DOC grant.
I know the program can't be 100% successful, so I would like to have that in place, and you have.
Even with the drug court and stuff, they provided those types of numbers and just kind of carried it forward to this.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. I think we've covered everything. Next would be Julie Marie.
Good morning. I just have 2 things this morning. First of all, I have a proposed resolution. This would be 15, Tony.
The resident, Cater Diamond, no, and I think it's 14.
Is 14, so this would be 15.
Cater Diamond was 14.
Okay, so this would be proposed resolution 2021-15. It's been brought to my attention by Shannon that the county is reimbursing mileage at the rate of 40%. The IRS sets a mileage rate every year, and currently it's 56 cents a mile. We need to be keeping up with that rather than stagnating with the old 44-cent number. So this is simply a resolution that indicates that rather than continuing to have to update our manual, we'll simply indicate that the county reimbursement rate will mirror whatever the IRS rate is for that given calendar year. So we can discuss and decide whether or not that's a resolution we want to adopt.
Are you going to send that out to us so we can see it? I don't think it was sent to us yet.
No, I did not send it to you. It was kind of a last minute thing. I can read it to you. It's actually very brief. Adams County Council is the fiscal body of Adams County pursuant to statute, whereas the Adams County Council is authorized to establish for its employees a sum for reimbursement of their use of private vehicles for conducting county business in the scope of their employment per statute. Whereas the United States Internal Revenue Service, IRS, establishes an annual standard mileage rate used to calculate the deductible cost of operating a motor vehicle for purposes of business. Now therefore be it resolved by the County Council, County of Adams, State of Indiana, that the Adams County Council shall adopt and employ the annual standard mileage rate established by the IRS for the calendar year during which said qualifying expenses incurred. And it would indicate that its adoption would be effective upon its passage.
Make a motion to accept. Second.
Summers and Fred?
John and Fred?
Yeah, sorry. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
I just have a question. If there are mileage claims that have not been paid yet but have been turned in since this resolution just passed, do we do it under 56 or the 44?
It's effective now, so anything that gets processed after today should be processed at the 15th. Okay, and the other thing, I put a copy on everybody's desk of an updated draft of the County Council proposed policy and procedures manual. You will notice that there are portions of it that are highlighted and portions of it that are written in red. That would reflect the comments that I've incorporated from members of the council that have responded and given me suggestions and feedback. The primary the first page, you'll see introduction and membership is all highlighted. That was something with regards to governance that was suggested, so I added that. That actually comes from a prior draft of one of the county council manuals. There was some question with regards to formatting and the order of things. That can always be done later. With regards to meetings, the change that I have noted, the change that was suggested, it currently says the agenda shall be established by the Adams County Auditor. It's been suggested that language be changed, and the proposed suggestion indicates that auditor and president should work together to set the meeting agenda, and it does further specify that no person with a legitimate, timely budget-related issue shall be denied inclusion on the agenda, provided said request is submitted in writing to the auditor's office not less than 10 days prior to the scheduled meeting date, and that would conform to the notice requirements. With regards to the order, yes, certainly.
Do we need to put in there 10 business days? Because Open Door Law has.
Sure. We can add 10 business days. That's going to be put in there. I can add that. With regards to order of service, we currently have, order of service, pardon me. Order of agenda, we currently have an opening prayer instead of moment of silence, so I made that indication. We can discuss that. With regards to adjusting the order of agenda, I simply made a notation pursuant to a comment received that we're not hamstrung to have to go by the agenda order. As you saw today, we had to go a little bit out of order. Big question was with regards to the budget period. So I made some amendments there indicating that the budget time would be a scheduled time in August or September up to 4 consecutive days. That way we can schedule it and decide how much time you want to spend, but you're not required to spend the full 3 or 4 days as previously proposed in the budget. The June 15th deadline was proposed and adopted by the county council for submission. I don't know if you want to stick with that deadline or if you want to have something different. So it was proposed that we have a deadline adopted by a majority vote of either the Adams County Board of Commissioners or the Adams County Council. You'll have to decide who does that. Clarification with regards to who is responsible for submitting the budgets to Gateway. It is the auditor, it is not in fact the county council, so that clarification was made. And the terminology and acronyms are all in there for purposes of just reference. We have a whole lot of acronyms that used to be used. Now it's only pretty much lit. That was in the prior draft, so I kept that in there, but simply updated it with the new terms as they were used. Last one is just an appendix making reference to Robert's Rules of Order. The current edition that was just issued in August of 2020 is the 12th edition, so I would suggest to you that you identify the edition because each edition does have some changes. So in order to have one cohesive reference manual, I think it's important to make reference. The only other thing is a request, a discussion with regards to authority in conducting matters before the council must be done by the president, but removing the phrase terms of subject time and presenters because there is discussion with regards to who's setting the agenda, so that would be reference to that. And last, it previously said a member may abstain from voting when there's a matter of direct personal, monetary interest, pecuniary interest, conflict of interest, that kind of thing. I believe it should say shall, so that was my personal notation. Nobody mentioned that to me. So with that, that is the edited draft that culminates with the comments that I have received. I have only received comments from 4 members of council. Everybody has not responded, so I think that probably a little bit more time and discussion needs to be had before a final draft. But this is what we have now, and if anybody has any questions, comments, would like to discuss legal ramifications of any or all of these changes, please just feel free to let me know.
So would we need a motion to, like, we should take time to review this, I think.
That's what she said.
Yeah, so do we need a motion to do that, or?
No, this is just kind of a work in progress. We're not going to need a motion for a vote until you're ready to adopt a
Gotcha.
resolution and discuss specifically what you want to change.
One thought I had,
Sure.
and I appreciate all of this time. I know it takes a lot of time to get all this stuff organized and sorted out. I wonder if it would make it a little bit clearer for future councils if we can separate a little bit, make almost like 2 sections, where one section we pull out all the stuff that's really, it's more like informative. You know, it's not as much policy as it is background for them. So for example, like the membership of the council is made up of 7 members. I mean, that's not really a policy. That's just kind of, you know, it's reciting for them. It's an orientation almost. And then you can have maybe a second section that has all the things that relate to what we're actually deciding. That way, if they ever want to make any changes, it's pretty easy to say, here's the policy section, and here's just kind of the recitation of the way things are that we don't have any say over.
Okay.
So, I mean, just to kind of, this is just an idea, but as I look through that first page, just to kind of kick it off, I would say the whole first page would be in that, yeah, orientation section, yeah, and I think all the second page would be too, and I think all of the, I guess it's page 4 actually, but all of that one, other than the monthly meetings, when we hold those, who does the agenda, those 2 would be, you know, in the policy section, but everything else under there is just, you know, reciting the open door law, things like that. So just kind of kick it off at like page 5, I would say almost all of that is policy.
Okay.
I don't know what you guys think about that, but it might be easier to, like this side is here's what we need to know, and then this is things that we want to talk about and change and decide.
Sure.
And we probably don't want to change. I mean, I like all these changes, but it just make it a little bit easier.
And I think your terminology should go in the orientation part of it. It's not
Yeah.
a policy.
Yeah, I like that terminology and acronyms, exactly. I'd put that in the orientation section.
Okay.
The Robert's Rules of Order, I mean, unless we're changing the rules of order, it's all you're basically doing there is reciting it. So that kind of would make sense to go in that section as well.
In the informational section rather than procedural?
I would think, unless we're changing something, which I think everything in there is essentially just reciting what's in the Robert's Rules.
Yeah, it is pretty much just.
Would current issue of Robert's Rules of Order rather than the 12th be better to put in there?
I'm sorry?
Would a current issue of Robert's Rules of Order be better than identifying the present issue as 12?
That's the alternative, to say whatever the current Robert's Rules of Order are will apply.
Yeah.
Rather than indicating specifically which.
And that's where you could put in the policy section, we're using the Robert's Rules of Order, and then in the informative, you can recite kind of what some of the basics are.
Nope. And that's all I have.
Well, the part, so where the setting of the agenda. So now it reads, the auditor shall work with the president of the county council.
This is all just for your information.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be
I've gathered
discussed
all the information,
eventually.
Suggestions from different members of council as to how we should reword or edit or omit certain things. So this is for your consideration. When it comes down to actually voting on the contents, this is just so you know that somebody else wants this particular phraseology.
Right.
You can vote to keep it status quo, to make something entirely different than this, or to adopt what's been proposed.
I guess my question was procedurally, how would we move forward if there's, well, you can go here or you can go here? How, what would be the direction of, say, department head? Is now, would there be two people setting the same agenda?
And that's a hot topic that the council has to decide. If the council wants to maintain the status quo and simply have the auditor or the deputy auditor be the sole individual, sole body that is in charge of setting the agenda, none of the rest of this information is necessary. That's for consideration, because that's an alternative that's been proposed. It's not adopted. Right now, it's just the auditor. That's the current policy.
Okay.
So that's for your discussion.
Fair enough.
I think, are you asking, do we do that discussion now, or are you asking?
Yeah, that's-
Kind of asking,
Yeah.
when do we do this? Yeah.
And if you want to, make a motion and have at it.
I mean, I think we can probably get through the rest of them. How many other, I don't want to hold anything up.
Well, I don't know, maybe it would make sense to, I mean, if you guys are in agreement on kind of breaking it up a little bit, if you want to reorganize it a little bit, see if anybody else has any other comments, and then maybe next month go through them.
I'd be
We can go
fine
talk
with
about it, but-
I'd be fine with that, honestly.
And that way I have time to redo and send everything out again.
Is there a reason you interjected August or September for budget meetings?
Previously, August and September have been in the manual as when the budget meetings would be. It used to be 4 days or 3 days in September, and then there was another draft that I saw that said budgets should be starting to be considered in August. So I simply put in August and September in consideration of both of those two to allow you the option to change it or decide when you want to have budget. So it's just, everything is on the table. Everything is an option at this juncture. But the current policy is the first one that I sent to you. That is what's in full force as of right now. Any other questions?
Thanks.
Okay, next would be the auditor's report. So I believe, Tony, we've done all the additionals.
We've done all the
Individually.
additionals, the transfer, and the salary ordinances, which Golden Meadows was originally on there, but we've zeroed that out on the approval line since that didn't come up this month. So these should all be set to sign. There are three things to sign. I'm going to start with Kathy.
Kathy, do you have that resolution that got passed around?
Right there.
Okay.
Need it back?
No, I
I usually set them there and then give it to him after.
Got it. So yeah, there's three different things. Sign all three, pass it to Mr. Dennis if you would.
Do I have a motion for the adopted or the amended salary ordinance?
Make a motion to accept the amended salary ordinance.
Fred?
Second.
John? John, next month, can you change your nameplate so I'm not thinking you're Stan? I'm having trouble with your first name for some reason when I see Stan.
I don't know where it's at.
So we have Fred and
I was Doug for a big part.
Fred and John. Fred and John. Any further discussion concerning the amended salary ordinance?
When they come this way, I'll just pass them back around.
Otherwise.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Everybody okay with the salary ordinance? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion,
There you go.
motion carries.
Yes, we need direction, as we discussed, since we have our scheduled budget workshop with the DLGF on the 21st, we had to have some direction prior to then, and you guys don't meet until August. A lot of this information came up, Corey, Yvette. Actually, John walked in while we were having the Zoom meeting as well, and here for the last 10 minutes or so of it. But we need direction as far as advertising. And if you remember, Paige had said that you could put a line that says personal services that sits there, and we also asked the DLGF, and they said, that's fine. You can do that as long as you don't have that sitting in that line after the adoption of the budget. Because then, if you did that, that would mean that everything the following year would have to be an additional for every single, you don't want to do that. So, unless Yvette or Corey or John or somebody else or Bree or Shannon heard anything differently, I believe Paige's direction was to accept the max levy. The growth quotient was 4.3, and that you can put in that line a contingency 3% increase should we find areas out of the budget to move out of county general, which we have found some. Once we find those things, we will get those to Paige, and she will throw those in there and see how that changes the cash flows and revenues and such. So, I think, did I say that right?
And we'll have to do more than one line item because you can't just do county general because you pay wages out of more places than just county general.
Right.
I did want to make a few comments about the budget as a whole. Kind of along the lines of what Tony's saying there. I was up here for a few hours last Thursday talking about this exact thing and looking at things. And, you know, at that time, we were able to identify really about 850,000 or so that can come out of the county general budget. So one of those being, for example, the bond payment for the jail. I talked to Tony and Bree. It sounds like in previous years, one payment was made from county general, the other one from the Cume jail fund. But for whatever reason, last year we paid it all out of county general, and we were looking to do that this year. And while I do agree with accumulating funds in that fund, we do have a brand new jail. So I don't think we need to accumulate money at a very high rate, but we should continue to do that. However, that fund is there for exactly this. And so I think we should pay one of those bond payments this year. There's 2 bond payments. We should pay one of those out of the Cume jail fund, I believe, which frees up minimum $650,000. A second thing that we identified, for example, is the software purchase that we're going to make for the tax software. You know, in my experience with budgets, you really have kind of 2 different budgets. You've got an operating budget and a capital budget. And we don't really distinguish those, honestly. And so that software purchase is a capital expense. And in looking at, I believe, the CUME cap fund, there's some other software that's being purchased out of that fund. And so I think we should do the same with this. So right there is another 200,000 roughly. And I think you guys identified some more things than after I left too, right? I mean, can you speak to some of that?
Some other things that we're looking at and going through as we get time. And Paige had directed or asked if we could get those to them to show how that's helping county general and so forth and so on. So yes, we are in the process of looking it up. The other thing, Fred, that was discussed, and I know Corey would know about this because I think you had asked about some of the funds that had money sitting in them. And Bree found out that the Special Distribution Fund, which hadn't been used since 2017, has 557,000 approximately in it that can only be used for roads and bridges. Brad now knows that, and so that is not in county general, so that is money that won't have to be spent that they would have spent out of county general that can now be spent out of the special distribution. So there's another 557,000 right there. So just those three things take quite a bit out of county general.
And, along those same lines too, when it comes to roads, we were in discussion yesterday about it as well. We have several funds, one of them came up today, the MVH fund. But that's the MVH and the restricted MVH are just a couple of them. There's more than that. And yes, ditches and stuff all kind of roll on that too. We quickly found $7 million that is not in county general. And so I just think we need to be more diligent, and that's something I will definitely continue to dig into to make sure that we're paying out of the appropriate funds and give ourselves as much versatility as possible. So that might mean reviewing some of the rules of the restrictions. But for example, our overall balance has increased $14 million in the last 4 years. And just now the county general fund ebbs and flows a little more, but still, as of last week, it had grown almost $2 million since last year. So, and Rex, I mentioned to you prior to the meeting about, there's another thing that's on the commissioner's budget when it comes to working on ditches or something that you had mentioned last Thursday, that right now it actually is reflected in the commissioner's budget, but it really will be paid from something else. So I'll let you speak to that.
What we're going to do is, before the commissioner's budget had that line item, for the equipment that the surveyor needed, was paid out of the commissioner's budget. Okay, so the trailer and the truck was coming up, and the question came up in the drainage board meeting was, why can't we allocate some of that cost to the ditches, because that's where the work is being done. So Mark Murray did some research, and we can go ahead. It was the understanding that we couldn't take any equipment purchase out of that. Well, we can't. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and keep track of the time that's spent on the various ditches. Then we're going to bill those, so to speak, and recoup some of that cost. We're going to establish an hourly rate, and that's what they'll use to establish that cost and reimburse the general fund. So right now, I got a budget in the line item, or we do, for I think 160,000, I believe. And 130,000 of that was really put in there for the survey. So we're going to recoup that cost back and probably use kind of the depreciation factor that the IRS uses for trucks and trailers. So like 5 years on the truck, 7 years on the trailer.
Okay.
So we're going to charge for ditches and get reimbursed.
So right there, just the stuff we've just rattled off there is well over $1 million that comes right out of county general and then out of some of these other funds that honestly we have quite a bit of money in. And so I just think going forward, we definitely need to make sure we're looking at that. And many of us are new and really learning how to use that money and how to get it to the places we want it. So we are using that correctly and taking some of the burden off of county general. I understand the focus on county general, but again, our overall picture is very good. You know, $14 million in 4 years is, I think, pretty good. So we just need to continue along those lines and looking at those. And then honestly, as well, along those same lines, and I'm definitely willing to head it up if that's, I guess I'll say that I am, whatever you want to label it, you know, to start looking more at long-term planning as far as, you know, Superior Court, yes, capital improvement plan is, and you know, some of that's kind of set in stone right now. For example, the Sheriff's Department, they replace 3 cars every year. So, I mean, those are all capital purchases. So we know about that. But, you know, we can start with in the short term, and maybe, you know, I don't know if Superior Court is in such dire straits that, you know, we just have to start right now, trying to do what we can for it. But, you know, looking down the road, this building, you know, at some point the jail will need, you know, some capital improvements, capital expansion, whatever. But, and we already do have a fund for that. But just to make sure that we're looking down the road, planning appropriately, as we accumulate these funds, which I have no problem that we do that, you know, it would just decrease a bond, you know, down the road, that we do as much as we can to get those monies into those funds where we want them. And so,
Along that line, excuse me, prior to giving us direction on advertising and such that we were discussing, there's another thing that we kind of need to know prior to doing that, and I think Shannon wanted to bring that up and ask it, which we, I think we had broached this subject, Corey, when we met with you, but we kind of need to know which direction to go on this because it does kind of affect, let me get out of your way.
So this is the 2020 resolution on wage adjustments, that was adopted as of January 1st, 2021. Like Tony said, we talked about it with Corey last week a little bit. And I just, being new here and learning how everything works, I'm trying to get up to speed in what this all means. So I was under the impression that this policy states that employees were to receive these adjustments each year as a cumulative increase. And after speaking with Corey, that's not what was intended. So I need clarification on what this actually says from your perspective and what we're gonna do moving forward.
that was one of the things I wanted to bring up too, real quick. So so based on the stuff I just said, I do feel like we should adopt the 4.3% growth quotient, a 3% raise for county employees. And then this, I do think it needs to be clarified because it sounds like it's being interpreted differently, this wage adjustment thing.
I think just to be clear though, what we're talking about right now is just what to advertise. It's not we're not actually approving any of those things. We're just trying to put a number in there so that we have a ceiling from which to work on. And then as we go through the budget process, we have a clearer picture of where we're at. That's when we'd make those final decisions.
We didn't know how much difference it would make if you put the wage study and the degree thing in prior to a raise, or if you put it in after the raise, and that's the question that we had.
Right now, we've started the 2022 salary ordinance and we put in the evaluation scores. And then that's when the question came up of how are we supposed to figure for 2022? Do I take like my current rate and then add on the 25 cents for a degree and then up to 25 cents for evaluation? And then whenever you guys decide if we're getting raises and how much of a raise, does that go on at that point? But we were going to try to figure these wage adjustments prior to advertising, because if we don't, we're not going to advertise high enough. If you're not going to incorporate these into the
bottom dollar. So we need clarification on the process of how this is all gonna take place. Is this expected, like Bree said, to be added onto her current rate? Or is this expected to be part of the raises? Is this expected to be, you take it back down to the base and then you add on this 50 cents? We need clarification on how this ties into everything.
And was this meant to be more or less a one-time thing? Like, okay, so we all got it for 2021 salaries, but say somebody got 25 cents for their evaluation for this year, but then their evaluations that we just got turned in that we're figuring for next year, say they lost, 5 cents. So are we then taking money away from people?
We should
Or
not
was
take
it-
money away.
Okay. Yeah, and I can recap where we talked about too. I think that, and Dennis, you can correct me, Tony, if Shane was here, I'd ask him too, but whether we want to change it or not is a different discussion as to what was the intention and what was intended to be a pass in the past. In the past, last year when we had this debate, we talked about if we wanted to have longevity, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about that, and I think the result was this, where it said you have a base pay, you get the extra 25 cents if you have a degree above what the job description requires, and then each year, depending on your performance, you get between 0 and 25 cents extra, depending on your performance. So if you have bad performance evaluations, it would be 20 cents, or 5 cents, or maybe nothing. If you have a really great performance, then it could be up to 25 cents. I think it was that simple. And then if you ever wanted to make raises or changes, we would change the categories for the base pay. So an NE1 would become, instead of $11 or whatever it is, it'd become $11.50. And we would make that change for everybody. So it was fairly simple, and that was the intention. Somewhere along the way, it sounds like the employees kind of got the idea that you get 25-cent bonus this year. And then if you do good next year, you get another 23 cents, plus the next year, another 23 cents, where the raises were meant to be at the base, and the performance evaluation was exactly that. A bonus based on your performance, which can change from year to year. Now, if you want to change that, we can, but I don't think there was any doubt last year that was the intention. I know it wasn't a unanimous vote. I think, Tony, you said you were the only one that voted maybe against it.
I voted against it. I don't remember what Steve did. I felt like we should have gone with experience or cost of living raise instead of this because it was gonna be a mess.
I think the problem is the way that was signed by council last year. If you read on the third page, which, Shannon explained to it says, for the performance, it was up to 25 cents per hour additional per year after the initial 6 months. And then it says the same thing for education. It is an education adjustment will offer 25 cents per hour additional each year after the completion. So I believe that's where
Well,
it says each year, and that's what was sent out.
And that's where it's confusing, the wording itself, because I can read it both ways too. So the question is, that is confusing. So what was,
You're correct. In the very top paragraph, it does say in addition to their base wage, but then the two next paragraphs, they kind of conflict with that. So I'm asking for clarification and what should we do as a process for this policy for this year? Because we have to know something. We're gonna have to.
we do, I would suggest that I don't say kick the can down the road, but I would say when we have better decisions. So right now, I would say we just advertise high. There's no harm in that. Advertise it high. We don't need to make.
Advertise as if it were going to take place now.
Whatever number you guys think we need to keep
Okay.
our options
Because
open.
we don't have to go, you just can't go backward. You
Yeah.
don't have to go that high, so.
And that, because I don't feel comfortable making a decision on really any of this stuff until we know better, having gone through the workshops, where did we land? What other money were we able to find, like what you're talking about? Where did we end on all this?
Well, from my understanding though, this policy is already essentially written in stone for this year, correct? So we have to do something with this no matter what.
Before next year.
Before next year.
Right, which we'll do that during the budget process, is what I'm
Which is
suggesting.
September.
August and September, yeah.
So you want me to bring this back in September for more?
Well, that's my
clarification?
suggestion. I mean,
I would agree with Corey. Right now, if we just advertise high and cover that, I think the rest of this, we kind of need to look at and mull it over. For example, on the education thing, I don't necessarily think it should be every year, each year from now to infinity. But, you know, you could say 2 years is a quarter for 4 years, bachelor's is 6 years, and a master's is 8 years, but then it's done. Something like that, so it's scaled and not forever and ever, amen. Because right now it reads, you're gonna get a quarter an hour every year, each year. That's the way I understand that.
Which is back to the confusing language, because I think the intention again there was as a one-time deal, like you get 25 cents added onto your base, and that reoccurs in the sense that it continues, not that it compounds. So I think, yeah, we gotta clarify either way. I agree. We can't leave it like that.
And then the other part, as far as the performance weight base, it seems odd to me to have that separate. It's like you're getting two different raises all within the same time period. That seems odd to me. I would just do it all, kind of all
Well, if you're only going 25 cents, that's $520 a year.
And to be clear, that was never intended to be like your cost of living raise, that or anything like that.
No, I
That's
meant an
just meant
incentive
to be-
for a degree for $520. That's not really worth it. To me, I would.
I mean, it can cost you thousands of dollars to get
Yeah.
that. So that's why, let's set it for, if you have a bachelor's degree and it goes for 6 years or 8 years, I mean, that's $1.50 or $2 an hour, which that's a little more enticing to get that degree. But that decision doesn't have to be made now for sure, but there definitely needs to be more clarity around these things,
Is there something imperative that you need clarified today?
Not necessarily, I figured since they were gonna be talking about all of that stuff, I'd bring it up, because, we talked, but it didn't really give me any more clarification based on what the employees understand versus maybe what was intended. So no, not necessarily, so I'm happy to come back if I need to.
So I think right now,
do it at budget time.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with Corey, advertise high. That way it kind of encompasses everything, and we can make the final decision on this year anyway, in the upcoming year at budget time.
Well, I guess
Then we need to address this policy.
Are the raises based on the base pay of any
Yeah,
four
so part of
or
our
whatever?
budget process should be, what are we making it for this year or next year? Are we changing it by a percentage, leaving it as is, adding a flat amount?
The
That's what we have
raises
to do.
wouldn't go in account to the incentive pay.
Right, just for the base, yeah.
Okay.
I do think that base scale, most places that gets adjusted every year. Ours probably should too.
Yeah, we just have to decide what it is.
So, yeah, that way we're not, if 5 years go by, all of a sudden it's like, well, who wants to go work for that much?
Right.
I think that needs to be a discussion by council and the new HR person going forward, maybe the auditor and so forth. The other thing, that we had a question on was the salary ordinance. And in order to make it easier, because the issue that we fell into obviously was anytime somebody's pay is different than the spot that they're filling, there has to be a salary ordinance in a 144, which meant that the council has to deal with that every month. And the issue was whether or not that could be done more simply so that doesn't have to happen, that we could find a simpler way. And quite frankly, I've researched it. I think Julie Marie's looked at it, and we have yet to find exactly how those are arrived at, but we will, because that has to be done, I think, prior to the adoption of the budget. We have to adopt a salary ordinance for the next year. So that's something else that we are going to continue to research that and figure out how to make it more simple and word it the way that council wants it to avoid a lot of the traps that we're falling into now with that. Does that make sense?
And the other thing that we had talked about, the three of us, was, as that new scale that was developed over the last couple of years, there was kind of different people keeping records in different ways. And so once again, we need to kind of simplify it and get it into one kind of package, basically. And
That's one reason we have you, right?
Yes, that's what we talked about. We were like, hey, who can do that? Oh, that's perfect for you. So because I had an Excel that was keeping track of anytime we made changes to who was in any, whatever, then she had a different Excel, completely different, and then they had another one and they were not all the same, obviously. So we just got to figure out
I mean,
an easier way.
different people can keep track of it, but the official version, I think Shannon is responsible for.
And
I
the
would say-
office has to have the correct version because we're the ones on the line for it.
And
So
honestly, like that sheet doesn't even matter to state board. When they come in and audit us, they're not gonna.
they won't
that.
look at
They're gonna
HR, they'll
our-
look at us.
They're gonna look at our salary ordinance, so that's why I always go back to whatever is on the salary ordinance is what is.
Right, but somebody still needs to be the keeper of that.
Yeah,
And
and,
the
well,
salary
and
Salary ordinance, whatever gets
Uh.
approved, and then like the changes that are made in the council meetings, like after today, I'll go up and make changes to the salaries, and that's what we work off of. So that's why we copy the paste, and we're already working on the one for you guys to approve in October.
yeah,
Because that's what SBOE looks at. Not that they don't care about Shannon, they just don't.
Well,
They
when
go
I
to
say
the auditor's office and we're the one that has.
you
to
guys
do
are
it.
responsible, but
Yeah.
I mean, we have an HR person now to help us
Correct.
and guide us
To
through
get
that
us to the
stuff.
right place,
I
and
mean,
then we're
that's-
the ones that sign off on all the stuff with the state.
Right.
and where we were getting confused wasn't so much the salary ordinance, because I don't think anybody ever tried to do that other than you guys. It was on the which positions are in NE4? What's the list of NE4s? What's the list of it? That's where we started to, as we made changes throughout the year, people made appeals and all that, keeping track of where they landed. That was the kind of stuff that will be awesome to have now, that you can consolidate all that into one place.
Well, and even that stuff, I mean, that only started, what, a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in all reality, I would think there'd be a learning curve about how people get categorized.
Yeah.
And
The
so,
other thing
I mean,
that we have to decide, particularly since we're working on the timekeeping, actually Shannon can speak to this, I'll let Shannon speak to the PTO, the timekeeping, the policies and all of that stuff, but, we will need to know on the salary ordinance, is it hourly, is it daily? How does that need to be worded, and what can Lau do in the financial system with that, and how that works with advanced time? So all of that has to also be figured out as we're going through the process. Did I say that right?
Right. There's a lot of moving parts to the timekeeping system, so I want us to keep that in mind, that this is gonna have to be clarified. Our process for raises is gonna have to be clarified. Our PTO is gonna have to be clarified. There's a lot of things that we're gonna have to kind of all come together on and discuss and figure out what the actual decision is and how to implement that properly, because everything essentially that I and Bree work on from a benefits and payroll standpoint is tied to timekeeping essentially. So we just need to keep that in mind.
So is there a way to reach out to other counties that are using LAO to figure out what they're
Yep,
doing?
And
And
we do have a meeting scheduled in a couple weeks to go up to, I believe, Whitley County, and we're gonna reach out to Huntington as well to kind of get their experience, to see how they processed. and
We also have
been through that
a
transition.
conference in Plymouth, Thursday, where a lot of auditors will be. There's always time for some questions, that we can ask other auditors, and they're doing a segment on HR as well, so I'm sure there will be some other HR people that we can maybe ask some of these questions while we're there. Bet you could actually ride your bike here, it's about 100 miles. So, isn't that the last you did, 100?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think, well, I don't know if they brought up wage appeals, but I think wage appeals is gonna have to go into all of this as well.
How it all ties in together.
Right, yeah, we'll have to look at wage adjustments, wage appeals, raises. I mean, there's like 10 different things that we'll have to sit down and really hammer out and decide officially on a process, because from my perspective and all the information gathering that I've done in the information that's available to me, I don't see a set process. So that's why I came today, is just asking.
And we had talked that there is a process for when their job description changes, but that's what we're talking about, is we don't have a process
There's
for what
actually a
if we
resolution
just,
for that, and I didn't know that, and
Yeah.
I got it from Julie Marie yesterday.
but then there's not one, like you said, for what if they're just changing in the middle, they just think it needs to be reclassified.
so could I request that after you've reached out to these other counties, after this meeting that you're having and whatever else is in there, I mean, can you come to us with your own personal experience in HR, that you come to us with a recommendation, maybe send us that stuff ahead of time, so we don't, maybe we can respond to it or ask questions about it at that following meeting versus, just having a recommendation based on the facts you have and what you've collected and all that, I think would be nice to for us to evaluate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. John, with the IT, have you heard any more about the council getting Excel before we go into the budget season? Has there been anything?
And I honestly haven't been to their last two. I try to make it when I can. It's, a date night meeting, and I haven't been there for the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So, no.
Okay.
I guess I can further expand. It all depends on the VPN. And actually, Stan was here. He might know, but it's like I explained to you, the working VPN or virtual desktop, but no, I don't really.
Okay. For council training, if everyone, I don't know if you've all gotten the new members. I don't know if you're getting mailing from AIC, but the annual conference is September 20th through the 23rd in Switzerland County. If anyone is interested, I saw in the last mailing they had a list of all the workshops. If anybody's interested in that. Does anyone have any boards that you're on that you want to give us updates for the council?
I can give a little bit of one. First of all, you heard with probation and corrections department, all that they are going to the changing from the drug court to the, what's it called,
Project Sunrise.
Project Sunrise. They mentioned it, but it sounds like it's actually a little better option than the drug court, and hopefully it works out a little better, gets people help a little faster. And they mentioned in our meeting that the state is actually inquiring about it, like we might be a trendsetter in the rest of the state, who knows. So that's going on. And as far as the animal shelter, we have initially accepted an offer from the Heiser family, I think it is. And one thing we talked about that I think potentially could throw a monkey wrench in things is, they're talking about building that building, and the real question mark though is going to be the septic system. Will the soil test for that, or what lengths do we have to go to make that happen? So I believe I heard that they were doing a soil test this week, possibly, I'm not sure. But that could affect things a little bit. But right now, if things go through as proposed, it would cost the county around $60,000 a year, which in the commissioner's budget, I think they've got $100,000 in there for that because it was really unknown, honestly. But even at $60,000, I think that's not a bad price for us. So we'll just have to see how all the testing comes out, but that's kind of where that stands. We have an initial agreement, I think, at this point.
Kathy, did you want to add anything to that?
Not on that, but Ed has told me that they're getting ready to install the new software so they can play with it. They're getting ready to start that.
Okay.
So,
Does anyone else have anything to report concerning your boards? No? Any citizen comments? Any citizens?
I would like us to see, before we start spending down these individual accounts to offset the cost on the general budget, is to set marginal limits as to what we can spend down to, as opposed to just spending it because it's there. And I would also like to see us look at a minimum cash balance for operational expenses for like 2, 3, 4 years, or whatever we decide, that our balances never go below that, or something that we have a target for, not necessarily a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, but I think we need to set those limits in place so that we don't exceed so our grasp doesn't exceed our reach, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree, Dennis. And honestly, too, for example, the rainy day fund is one we've discussed in the past. it's close to $2 million right now. And I believe, we discussed, we probably really should take a look at, versus reaching out of the air and just grabbing a number, we need to do a little research. And maybe that's talking to other counties. Maybe other counties don't have a limit either, I don't know. But we should try to set something, whether it's a percentage or whatever, to try to have that goal. And then once we're there, then we're reappropriating funds essentially. So.
Completely agree.
Are you guys talking about a maximum or a minimum?
Minimum, I think you're saying, like maybe it's 25% of your annual expenditures or some.
Well, that would be probably for the general fund, but for the rainy day fund.
I think that'd probably be a goal, but I don't think it'd be a.
You have to be a little careful.
Yeah.
Dennis will remember back in 2015.
There's times when it could probably dip below it, as long as we know.
But having a goal, you know what I mean, so
Yeah,
that we're at
that's-
least,
that's what
while
a
we're going
goal,
through the
not a-
budget, we know, oh, that one's we got plenty of room here, yeah.
The general fund would be a goal. I think something like the rainy day fund could be set at a certain percentage, personally. But
What I was saying, in 2015, when we had Benecom, Dennis will remember back then, we got in big trouble with our insurance to the point where we had to kind of put a freeze on spending. And some of the revenues that had to be used for things did have to come from some of these other funds, because we were pretty much, I would say it was nearly an emergency, because Mary was the auditor, and at that time she sent a press release out regarding this and what was happening, and that we were going to run very short prior to the June settlement because the insurance was the claims were just eating us up. I think, what was it, Dennis, $3 million or something, that $3 million was coming out of health insurance, and we were running out. Now, fortunately, since then, we've got Benecom out, and we have Ally, we have Elaine as a consultant, we're in a trust, and we have stop loss coverage. So that helps immensely. So when you look into, and I agree you need some limits, but keep in the back of your mind, leave yourself a way out if you need it. If you needed to vote on, well, we have to go above this percentage because we're in trouble over here, just keep that in the back of your mind when you discuss that.
I think that's going to be maybe just part of the wording. It's more a goal maybe than setting it in stone.
It's just, I would say it's just something for us when we're starting at the workshops to say, here's what we want. And as we're, that way you're not handicapped, but we're all in agreement. Here's kind of what we're trying to get to.
Just a couple other things real quick. So the budget, last year, there's a settlement we get every year, right? And last year that was around $15 or $16 million that we get from the state. Is that correct? So that's something that contributes to the budget that I know we don't know exactly what that number is, but I think we can probably historically guess based on that. And then we have some ARPA funds that we have $3.5 million currently, and we're going to get close to that, Tony, next year?
We should get that same amount next year.
So that's still out for debate, or not debate, but they're still deciding what all we can use that for, but that is money that's not general fund money.
That could be used instead
elsewhere.
of spending money out of.
It's not reoccurring money, but yeah, if there's capital, that would be money for capital projects, things like
Yes.
that.
Like right now, so this leads me to my next question. The chillers are getting fixed, right?
Well, we're gonna have to get new ones.
Or get new ones?
Right now, last I heard with Rick, and Rex might be able to correct me, he's alternating the use of one chiller at a time, I believe, or he's just using the one chiller, because the other one is off altogether. So one chiller is 24/7 operating to cool the building, and we don't know how long, of course, that's sustainable. So the commissioners have discussed putting bids out and getting bids on getting 2 new chillers. And the thought is that could be one of the approved uses of the ARPA money. What is that, Rex, 250,000 for both?
Yeah, you're really talking about 248,000.
Okay.
It's cheaper to go with 2, because if you
Yeah.
did 1, you gotta have a crane coming in, and you gotta get some additional equipment. So that was, I think.
And the control panels wouldn't mesh if you went with just one either. They,
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So we thought we better go with two because they're 26 years old. So if we had, only did one and the other one went bad, we got to bring back in again. So we'd have about another $25,000 in additional cost. So we actually approved going with 2 chillers and a new filtration system, which would, we think it may qualify for the yard because Greene County, we're kind of going after what they had done. They did an ordinance to do the same thing, to improve their HVAC system. So that's what we
of course,
want
that would
to
have
do.
to come before council also.
The thing that slowed us down is the fact that we got quotes. The market researcher said, well, we gotta go out for sealed bids. But we had a little bit of a conflict with DLGF said we could declare an emergency situation and do it that way, but Mark still wanted to do the sealed bid. So that's what's taking us longer.
You know, on the ARPA money, you know, I keep doing random projects around the house and that just keeps going through my head is what are we going to do with that money? Are we waiting too long? All that kind of stuff. But whatever I keep coming back to is without knowing what Congress is going to do on this infrastructure bill, you know, because at first I thought this is a great project that we could use for broadband or some of that kind of stuff. You know, but then I see the state's putting $250 million into broadband around, and then with this, what is Congress going to do with the infrastructure bill? I don't want to spend money that they're already going to pay for.
We might get, yeah.
So I kind of keep thinking, as long as there's no deadline, I'd almost prefer to let that sift out. But I keep thinking about it and wondering what is the best use.
Well, the chillers, they're not gonna say here's money for chillers, though. I think that'd be a capital replacement thing, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's a small, I mean, but yeah.
We do know some things, but NACO, well, Bree and I have watched, I don't know who else, but we've watched some webinars from NACO and AIC and everything else on this and have gone into the Treasury site. If anybody is aware of what PPP was, that changed as they went. Even the application process itself, somebody said it was like building an airplane as it was going down the runway to take off. And this is kind of the same way. So until you know what those exact uses are, we have a final interim rule that we can look at. You know, the recommendation is to just hold off until you have to spend it. And the good thing is it is in an account where it's gaining interest. And the interest that is gained from that, to my understanding, you can spend that interest on whatever you want. It doesn't have to be one of those uses. Another good thing is this conference Thursday that we are going to, one of the topics that they're discussing is the ARPA money, to see if there's any updates and so forth and so on. You basically have until the end of 2024, December 31st, 2024, to utilize all that money.
Okay, so we have, to make sure, we have till 2024 to have our plan basically.
To spend it.
To spend it.
Spend it.
Or to spend it.
By the end of 24, you have to spend it. So
We have to do reports. The last webinar we listened to, they're coming out of the portal that we will have to
We
go
have to
and
submit a
do
report.
reports every quarter.
first one is August 31st. Our office has to go into the Treasury portal and submit a report. If we haven't spent anything, then that'll be an easy report. If we have, we have to report that. If you try to spend it before everything's in place, there is a possibility that it would come back and it would not be an accepted use, and whatever that amount was, you have to pay that back and spend it out of something else.
So we want to wait a little bit, but we don't want to wait too much. Otherwise, even if you want to do a broadband, that might take a year and a half to actually do it.
Yeah, commissioners and council can kind of keep an eye on the news and see what Congress is doing and what's going on, but commissioners and council have to work together. The idea is really the commissioners can come up with a plan, work with the council on that plan, because council has to agree to the expenditures because you're the fiscal body. And then the auditor's office has to be involved because we have to submit all the reports and help you guys to make sure whether it's an accepted use or not. That will also be a job for Mark Burry and Julie Marie for guidance as we go along to tell us whether or not in our expertise this looks like an accepted use. So it's kind of an ongoing project, but the good thing is right now, it's gaining interest, it's sitting there. We're all good, we'll just develop the plans and get it done the right way.
That you have to have a plan on how you're going to spend it, where you're going to spend it by the end of 2022. You don't have to spend it till the end of 2024, but that plan must be in place. And that gives them the time to say, no, this is not a proper expenditure. But you have to have that in place by the end of next year.
That's something that will be developed by the commissioners.
Yes. And we're making a little over $1,000, about $1,072 a month on interest for it just sitting there. So
And that'll
not a ton, but it's better.
will that double too? Because there's a second payment coming out then too, right?
That will, yeah,
Next
that will
year.
double next year if we don't spend any of it by now.
Any other discussions we need to have?
There's one other thing that I would like to raise by point of concern, is that so much of our money is grant. You say we're getting $1,000 a month, but what would happen if those dollars disappeared? I would like to see a summary of who gets what and how long it's good for as a perpetual upkeep by way of understanding the budget process. Because I think if worse comes to worse and these grants disappear, we better have a plan in place of how we're going to fund positions, expenses, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the only way you can be aware of that is to have regular updates.
Grants are reported yearly. In what report, Tony? What is that report?
We just had to submit all the grants to the SBOA.
All the federal grants go on to CISA on the annual report, and the annual report.
Should
Those
be
are
in
just
Gateway.
federal grants, so any state grants that we get are not reported on it. And DOC, one of our, probably our biggest grant is not, that's all state money.
But again, I get what Dennis is saying. I remember in the past, well, with drug court, as a matter of fact, we had a couple times, you guys are probably on council too, when we said if the grant goes away, the position goes away. The DOC grants, Dennis is right, if you know, they have these programs in place that they fund, they would have to come and find a way to get that money if they wanted to continue whatever it is that they're doing. But the possibility is council would say, well, we're not gonna fund that. Or we can fund it here, or whatever the case may be. Let's hope that doesn't happen and the state comes through with their, you know, once it's done, once this is done now, that's good till next year. They know going in, this is how much you're getting for the year. So what you guys approve today will be good until next year, and then they'll come again and they'll know how much they're getting from the state at that time. So they should know beforehand if it's going to be lowered. As a matter of fact, that happened with drug court because of COVID. They could only guarantee that they could go 6 months. They didn't know what would happen the second 6 months. And at that time, you know, okay, well, we'll see what happens with the 6 months, but it might go away if that other 6 months doesn't come through. So
how difficult would it be to do, as Dennis is asking, to essentially provide a report of the funds and what those funds fund? Is it difficult?
let us look into that, because as you guys,
You want just grants?
Yeah, state and federal. Are you asking for like a monthly report or just a?
Quarterly, semi-annual, just to keep us up to date.
Most grants are in their own grant fund. We do have some grants that go back into county general, but, I mean, any federal grant has to be its own fund.
by statute.
And a lot of our local grants, we've been making,
their own funds, because it's just easier to track. Like I track every grant that the county has. So it's just a lot easier, because state board's here right now, and they asked for all of our federal grants the other day, so I had to send them all the paperwork on all their grants.
We'll look into it and see what's possible to figure something out on that, but Dennis, realize we're one short in the office, and we're being audited, and we have budgets. So we only have time to do so much right now. We'll work on that, but it might be a little while, okay? Unless you want me to get an ulcer. Well, actually, I already have one, but no, we don't want that.
But if someone wants that information, they can go through the minutes themselves and
Yeah,
document
you
it
can
that
go
way.
through you can go through the minutes. I think some of that information's out in Gateway, but
So they could probably look at our annual report.
the if you look at the annual report on Gateway, Dennis, I'll show you how to get on there. And I think most of that information that you're wanting to know might be on that annual report. I'll help you get going on that. I love you, Dennis. You can put that in the.
That's the headline.
Yeah, I love Dennis Blunt. I'm not afraid to say it.
If there's nothing else, are we ready to adjourn? Seek a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn. I'll second.
Dennis and Fred. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.